this body is, this church. I don't know what it is, just something about this is a really beautiful church. Do you ever have eyes to see the beauty of the people around you? Just how amazing the person next to you is. We're created by an amazing God. Created the whole universe. What is man, God, that you're mindful of us? The Son of Man, that you care for us. And yet you've made us a little lower than the heavenly angels, and you put the mountains and the stars and the snowfall and all of your creation at our feet to have dominion over it. The person next to you is the crowning jewel of God, amazing God's creative effort. So beautiful. And then when people choose to come together and form a body and worship Him, they become a thing together, a unified body worshiping God together. How beautiful. I've been thinking a lot about having eyes to see the beauty in the people in the world around us as I was getting ready for this. I drove in yesterday. Mike Ireland called me on, I don't know, Friday or something. I guess it was Friday, late Friday, and said, hey, I'm sick. Can you fill in for me at Mineral Springs this weekend? And I said, well, surprisingly, actually, I think I can. I called called Susan to make sure I really can, because she knows those things. I do not know those things. Turns out I can. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I didn't really have time to think. I was luckily, and then I saw that the weather was coming in, so I thought, well, I better leave early enough to Saturday to get there before all that hits. I did not leave early enough Saturday. I hit about Hot Springs, and it started getting cold and coming down on me. And it was really beautiful. I came through the hills between Hot Springs and here. Normally I go the interstate, but I didn't want to really be on the interstate when it started getting icy, if it did. So I chose to come the back road and came through some hills, and they were white with snow and ice. The trees were holding the snow, and the ground was covered. It was so beautiful. I finally made it to the parsonage. I stopped at the Dollar General over there to get some ibuprofen because I had a headache, and I forgot to bring my ibuprofen. And I opened the door, and ice is falling off my car, and go in. I get my ibuprofen, go over to the parsonage, and turn the heat up, and it gets nice and toasty in there, and I'm looking out that back window at the white fields and the white trees. And then I wake up this morning, and I open that door, and there's the white on the snow of the roof across the way with the pale blue sky behind it, because it had cleared up now, and the blue sky is contrasting with the white snow on the rooftops. It's beautiful, this world we live in. So amazing. Could you imagine having never been able to see? How would you describe the paleness of that blue sky and the whiteness of that snow to someone who had never seen color? I don't know the word you could do it. I don't know that you could put it in words. You just have to have the experience. How can you put that experience of seeing those colors to someone who had never seen it before? Who had never seen. I saw a video story last night as I was preparing some of my comments about a 4-month-old baby named Leo. Leo was born with a rare neurological problem with his eyes. Something rare was wrong with his eyes. And he could see, but not very well. He could see well enough that as a baby they didn't realize he was blind, but it took him a while to realize he was not seeing very well at all. He was about 4 months old. They realized something was wrong. They took him to the doctor. They diagnosed this problem with his eyes, and they made some special glasses that would help him to see. And his mom's holding him, and it had a little strap on him. They put a strap on him. They put the lenses over his eyes, and he saw his mom's face clearly for the first time. And this huge smile just bust out on his face. My mom's face! Look at her! There's color in her iris, and her white teeth, and the texture of her skin. And then his dad came into view, and his dad had a beard, right? And he looked over, and he looked startled at his dad, and he reached up and he pulled at his dad's beard, right? Because he'd never seen the beard before. What would it be like to see for the first time the beauty of this world that our God has placed us in? Oh, what a marvel that would be. Well, in Mark chapter 10, we get a story about something like that. We're going to look at a few stories of times whenever Jesus healed blind people this morning. Let me place what happened in Mark chapter 10 in context first. So the first about half of Mark takes place around the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is in northern Israel. It's a really remarkable place. It's really a big lake. And around that lake you have various cultures. Even today you have all kinds of cultures surrounding the Sea of Galilee. You got Syria on one side, Israel on the other. There's no difference in that day. You had Jewish cultures on one side and Gentile cultures on the other of the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus in Mark did most of his early preaching, the first half of Mark, he's going around the Sea of Galilee doing miracles. And he's really trying to keep it quiet. He would heal people and say, shh, don't tell anybody I did this. And then they'd go and tell people anyway. And slowly his reputation spread because people who he was doing miracles for told other people, and crowds started to follow him around, and everybody knew who this guy, this wonder worker, Jesus of Nazareth. Have you heard about this guy? He's healing people. He's healing blind people and people who can't walk. He's doing amazing miracles. And so his whole ministry is taking place around the Sea of Galilee. And then, about halfway through Mark, he sets his eyes to go to Jerusalem. He heads to Jerusalem because it's there that he's going to be crucified. So about Mark chapter 8, he heads towards Jerusalem. In Mark chapter 10, he's getting closer to Jerusalem. He's going through Jericho, which is on his way, not far from Jerusalem. And as he's going into Jericho, he comes across this blind man named Bartimaeus. Let me get my glasses out so I can read it. This is a new thing, by the way. I hate it so much. Okay. All right. Talking about eyesight. Blind Bartimaeus receives his sight. Mark chapter 10, verse 46. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. All right, so Jesus, they'd heard about this guy from up in Galilee, and a large crowd is following him around. He's coming into Jericho. I imagine I don't know if they had a mayor of Jericho, but whoever the important people of the town, they were all following him around. This was Jesus. Everybody heard of this guy. Huge crowd following him around. I want you to imagine this as they come into Jericho. Jesus and his massive contingent of all the important people, all kinds of the accepted people in society. And here's Bart on the side of the road begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and said, call him. All right, got to stop there again. You know, so many of these stories, they're told in deceptively simple language. But if you'll take the time to make this like a movie in your mind, if you'll see it play out, you'll see the power of this, right? Here's old Bartimaeus over by the side of the road and the contingent of people going by, and he notices something. He can't see anything, but he notices, he hears the noise, he notices something's different, and he reaches out and says, what's going on? And somebody who can see says, there's a crowd of people. They say it's Jesus of Nazareth. And he's heard of this guy. He's heard this guy has healed people. And he starts screaming out as loud as he can, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And they tell him, be quiet, man. You're annoying everybody around you. But he won't be quiet. He's not going to stop shouting out, Son of David, have mercy on me. Son of David, have mercy on me. And then he gets the noise. He gets the news. Hey, he's calling for you. You got his attention. And he goes up to him. And Jesus looks at him and he says, what do you want me to do for you? First of all, that's an odd question, right? Do y'all think Jesus knew what Bartimaeus wanted him to do for him? I mean, I think I could figure that out, right? And I'm not a heart knower like Jesus was and is. Jesus, do you really not know what Bart wants you to do for him? He's blind, man. But Jesus asked the question, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man says, Rabbi, I want to see. "Go," said Jesus. "Your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight. What was that like? He sees the colors. That's what it looks like. That's what leaves look like. That's what blades of grass look like. Oh, he sees for the first time. I know he wept. He couldn't have not wept. I know he did. Oh, what a story. Story of someone receiving sight. Someone who couldn't see, learning to see. There's another story. I'm going to go back a couple of chapters, and I'm going to look at another story of Jesus healing someone who couldn't see. This is in Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8, verse 22. They're still around the Sea of Galilee at this point in time, and they come to a town called Bethsaida. And some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. That's verse 22. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't go into the village." At this point, he's still trying to kind of keep it a secret a little bit, who he is. Now, that's a weird story, isn't it? Right? Sometimes in classes, occasionally I'll teach like a New Testament class. We'll be going over this, and I'll ask students, why did it take Jesus twice to heal that guy? One of them said something one time, there was a power outage. That's hard to understand. Why does it take Jesus? Jesus is God. Why does it take him twice to heal somebody if he decides to heal somebody? Now here is a tried and true method. When you come to something in Scripture you don't understand, keep reading. Right? When you come to something you don't understand, keep reading. Let's do that. Let's keep reading and we'll come back, okay? All right, verse 27. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Peter, oh Peter, brave, willing to speak out Peter. He says, "You are the Christ." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. He then began to teach them. This marks a shift in Mark, by the way, where he goes from being wonder worker and he begins to teach them more fully about what he's doing there. Mark 31. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. I wonder what Peter said to him. Why was Peter rebuking him? Well, here's what I think. Peter believed that Jesus was the Christ, but he didn't yet understand what it meant that Jesus was the Christ. Peter believed what many of the Jews of his time believed about this prophecy of the coming Messiah, that when God comes in his incarnate form, and he comes to save the people of Israel, he will establish an earthly kingdom. He will throw off Roman rule. He will bring Israel back to what it was supposed to be as the nation of God. That's what he was expecting the Christ to do when he came into the world. Peter had faith that Jesus was the Christ, but he didn't yet see clearly about what it meant that Jesus was the Christ. He saw, but he just saw people like trees walking around. I think the stories we see in Scripture, yeah, absolutely. In my mind, these describe the workings of Jesus. But God, in His mighty providence, some of these stories are more than just the events that happen. They also mean to communicate theological truths to us. The reason it took Jesus twice to heal that guy was because Jesus wanted to make a point about Peter's sight. Peter could see. He saw that Jesus was the Christ, but he couldn't see clearly. He didn't understand yet what it meant that Jesus was the Christ. And when Jesus tried to tell him, let me tell you what it means that I'm the Christ. It means I'm going to the cross. It means I'm going to die. I'm not here to reestablish an earthly kingdom of Israel. And Peter says, Jesus, why are you saying these things? He rebukes him. You're the Christ. You're going to restore Israel. Oh, Peter, not like you think. And stop tempting me. Stop tempting me to be concerned more about my earthly kingdom than I am my spiritual kingdom. I'm not an earthly king and I won't be one. I'm not going to exercise power the way the world does. My kingdom's a spiritual kingdom. Satan, get behind me. For you have not things of God in mind, but things of men. You don't understand the kind of kingdom I'm talking about. I don't know if I read that part yet. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter back. He said, get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. All right, notice we got a couple stories here of Jesus healing people, healing someone who couldn't see. But notice that these stories of healing people, yes, they're stories of Jesus really healing people, but they're also meant to communicate to us spiritual truths about sight. Right? There's sight, there's the sight that allows me, for example, to see that white snow on that pale blue sky this morning. My eyes work in a certain way that allowed me to see it. And when my eyes begin to not work properly, maybe I can't see it anymore. Right? It used to be I could see the words on this page without these things here. But my eyes aren't working right anymore. And now I got to put these things on so that I can see the words clearly enough to say them. So what's happening is my eyes aren't working right. My physical eyes. Sometimes that's what we mean by sight. But sight is broader than that too. Sometimes sight involves what's going on inside of us. So sometimes even knowledge. Let me try to give you a simple example of what I mean. I used to coach basketball. I love basketball. Really, really like it. Some good games last night, by the way. In fact, I have to admit, I took a little too long getting this together last night because that Alabama-Mississippi State game was pretty good. So my apologies. But I love watching basketball. My wife, I coached it for a while, and in coaching it, I tried to learn a lot about it. And my wife, sometimes, she doesn't love basketball. She hadn't watched much of it, but she'll go to a Harding game with me sometimes, and we'll sit in the stands and we'll watch the game. And my wife and I are sitting in the stands watching the game. And in one way, all the same, we're seeing the same court. All the same perceptual stuff is going into her eyes, right? She's seeing the people run around. But she's not really seeing the same thing I'm seeing. Because she doesn't have a knowledge base to help her interpret the perceptions that's going into her head, right? She just sees people running around on the court. Whereas because I know something about basketball, I can see like a really well played, well executed, where all five people are moving in just the right way at just the right time, and I go, wow, that was beautiful. Man, a well executed basketball play is truly beautiful to me. It's lost on my wife, poor soul. She can't see the beauty of it. How come? Because she doesn't have the knowledge base in order to understand what she's seeing. Now, if we're talking about basketball, I'm the one who can see, but there's lots of stuff. I mean, I don't know what you guys, I don't know what you're experts in. I don't know what you know about. I'm not much of a museum guy. Sometimes we'll take classes. I went on a trip called Scholars Abroad a few years ago where we took some students into Athens. And we'd go into some museums, and some of these museums actually had old artifacts, but also had some paintings. And we were looking at some beautiful paintings one time, and I was like, man, I like that one. How come? I don't know. Looks good, right? The person next to me knew a lot about paintings. And they said, oh, it might look good to you, but you don't really understand why. You actually are not seeing the way that they're using color in these ways and the way that they've used lights. Oh, light's so amazing, by the way. Light's incredible. The way that they're using light to do this and that, I don't know what they were saying because I don't have the knowledge base to even understand it. They could really appreciate the beauty of the painting in a deeper way than I could. One more example. I knew a guy who's a biologist. He studies wetlands. Met him when I was at Baylor. And we were talking about some of these things one time. He goes, when I go out to the wetlands in this area, he had some experiments going out, some studies going on out there. He goes, what I've learned about biology and the way these species work together in these regions, and I go out there and I see it, like I can't explain it, but there's just a beauty in the natural world that has been open to me because of my knowledge about even just the way these species work together. Sometimes just our knowledge base affects what we see as beautiful. Other things affect what we see as beautiful too. Sometimes what's going on in our soul, not in terms of our knowledge, what we know, but in other ways affects what we can see as beautiful. Have you ever gone through a broken period in your life where you were unable to see the beauty in the world around you? I hope you haven't. Maybe some of you younger people haven't been there yet. I bet most of you who've been around for a few years has been there once or twice. It just wasn't going well. The relationship was broken. Your kids were struggling. Situation with your mom and dad didn't get any better. And it just seemed like there was so much bad. You open the door on the snowy sky and you can't see the beauty of the white snow and the pale blue sky because you can't see beauty in the world at all because there's just so much brokenness and pain and suffering and it totally clouds anything you can see. Boy, it's hard to see beauty in the world around us sometimes. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 6. Oh, I want to say one other thing about that story before I look at Matthew chapter 6, actually. Notice that in the story in Mark 10 with blind Bartimaeus, Jesus says, your faith has healed you. She's got a few more minutes here. In Mark chapter 10, Jesus says, your faith has healed you. I want to talk a little bit before I close about what it means, why our faith is necessary in coming to be healed, what it means that our faith healed him. Now think about blind Bartimaeus' story. It's pretty obvious how Bart's faith healed him. Bart's faith was sufficient that allowed him to scream out above the crowd. Would you have been willing to do that? Would you have had enough confidence in Jesus to bring you sight that you would have been willing to make a spectacle of yourself with all the big crowd walking by? Would you have screamed out and made everybody look at you? Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. I'm blind. Help me, Jesus. Be quiet, man. Be quiet. Shut up. No, I won't. Have mercy on me. I'm blind. I need your help. Would you have had enough faith to make a spectacle of yourself? Bart's faith was sufficient. He was willing to scream out above the crowd because he needed Jesus' help. And in that way, his faith saved him. He had enough trust in God that caused him to be willing to do something that enabled God's power to help him see. What are you willing to do that can begin the process of putting you in a place where God's power can help you see? What will you do? Now, interestingly, the second story we read in Mark 8, did you notice there? It was actually, we don't even know the guy's name, and the guy never even said anything. Did you notice what happened there? Some friends brought him to Jesus. I guess he did say at one point, I see people walking around like trees. But there was no prelude to it. We don't even know his name. He never said, your faith healed you. He didn't go to Jesus. Some friends brought him to Jesus. Do you know your faith can be meaningful to the other people in your family, your loved ones, your community, this community? Your faith can help others. Because the faith of that man's friends in Mark 8 were sufficient for them to say, come on, Bob, let's go. We're going over here. This guy's been healing people. I don't want to go. Come on, Bob, we're going. And they take him to Jesus. And the faith of his friends healed him. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, Matthew chapter 6. Let's read. I'm actually going to read starting from verse 19. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I want to notice two things. The real point of this passage is coming next, but I want to mention a couple things about this. First of all, notice that Jesus didn't say don't store up treasures for yourself. In fact, he said store up treasures for yourself. People sometimes think of Christianity as a religion where we're like, we have to deny ourselves all the good stuff. If we'll deny ourselves all the good stuff, then we'll get to go to heaven and we'll get good stuff in heaven, right? But what Christianity is denying all yourself all the good stuff. No treasure, nothing for yourself. You have to deny. That's what Christianity is. But that's not Christianity. Jesus says, store up treasures. He's not opposed to treasure. What He wants you to do, He wants you to be rich in ways that make sense. He wants you to be sustainably rich. Whenever your heart comes to lusts after only these riches of the world, and you think that your life will be okay, you think you can have abundance, all your mind, your desires, the center of your desires is stuff, cars, money, the house. That's what you want. You know what? That's not going to last. Don't you know that moths will destroy and it's going to rust and thieves are going to break in and steal, and for that matter, you're going to die. You can't take it with you. Doesn't make any sense to make your whole life centered around building up these physical things for yourself. It's nonsensical. What you need to do is store up for yourself treasures in heaven, because that's going to last. Where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. I'm sorry, that's not what he says. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Do you not like where your heart is? Do you recognize that your heart is in the wrong place? You know what you can do? Move your treasure. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Then he goes on in verse 22, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If the eyes are good, the whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Well, it's a hard passage to understand. I don't know if I got it right. Let me just we can try something home for size this morning. Imagine not being able to see at all, right? Totally blind. Darkness is all you know, right? And again, think back to those times in your life when you haven't been able to see. Notice I'm using the word see here. You've not been able to see the beauty and the joy and the goodness around you. Very first thing I talked when I came up here is how I was having an experience of the beauty of this church. I really was, brothers and sisters. I'm not just saying that. Y'all are beautiful. I don't know if you can see that or not. I don't know if you perceive the beauty in the person next to you. I don't know if you perceive the beauty in yourself. You're really beautiful. I've had times in my life my first wife left me. Man, I can't even tell you what that's like. All the time, whenever you look, and all there is just darkness. It's hard to see beauty and love and joy, peace, goodness. Bad things happen to us. Our bodies break. It's hard. What Jesus is trying to tell us, I believe, in these stories of these healings of people who can't see, is that He wants us to know that He has the power to help us see properly. Not just with our eyes, but with the eyes of our heart. So that we can see the goodness and the beauty and the joy and the love around us. True sight always means love. I'll say what I mean by that in a second. But true sight always means love. The one who can see loves. It's those who can't see that have trouble loving. What causes us to not see? Well, sometimes if we're talking about the physical stuff, your eyes aren't working, right? But sometimes it's our knowledge base. We don't know. Like remember I was saying earlier that my wife couldn't see the beauty in a basketball game? Well, because she didn't have the proper knowledge base about basketball. Helped her fail to appreciate the beauty in it, right? Sometimes it's because something's gone wrong in our lives or we can't perceive the beauty of the created order around us. Things are just dark, desperate. Sometimes, by the way, our body's related to that too. Sometimes species of depression and anxiety are related to things that are going on in our bodies. Our bodies matter a lot, right? Sometimes our failure to see God is a failure of our bodies. When you're in a nursing home and you've had a heart attack and a broken arm and you're getting older and your body stops working properly, sometimes you're in a place because of your body where you're unable to see God as the way that He wants us to see us. But you know what? He's going to heal our bodies. We're going to get new bodies that are in working order. And when that happens, the only thing that will determine whether we can see God and one another in the world properly will be the state of our souls. Oh, I want to see Him. St. Augustine says in a book called Confession. He says in a book called City of God. He's talking about what we're going to do in heaven. He says, how will the saints be employed in that kingdom of which there is no end? And he says, there we shall see. That's the first thing he says. There we shall see. Oh, when we see God, when we see Him, well, we love. We can't not. We see Him. Oh, to see God and His beauty and His goodness and His greatness. He made everything and us. And He's trustworthy. We can count on Him. There we shall see Him and we shall love Him. And we'll love Him because we love Him. We'll praise Him. Praise will just flow out of us. How can we stop ourselves? Right? We'll see Him. There we shall see and love and praise. Oh, actually the first thing he says is rests, by the way. There we shall rest and see. The rest in heaven, by the way, is not a sitting around not doing anything. The rest in heaven is a flourishing involvement where we're creating stuff, but it doesn't make us tired. We can run for 100 miles, not get tired. Wouldn't that be something? We'll be creating together in community. It'll be amazing. It'll be a restful creation. And as we're creating, we will see God face to face. We'll rest and see and love and praise. Oh, may God give us eyes to see Him. He comes to us and He says, what do you want me to do for you? You having trouble loving? Are you having trouble seeing the beauty in the world around you? When I love honor from men more than I love honor from God, I don't see clearly. When I love money or cars or houses or clothes more than I love a quiet, intimate peace with God, I don't see clearly. When I treat God's children, my fellow men, any of them, as mere objects to get what I want, what I desire, I don't see clearly. When I fear disease in my body more than I fear a disease in my soul, I don't see clearly. When physical pleasures and comforts order my life, I don't see clearly. When I look to success or promotions or good things like the success of my children or the love of my spouse as the key to bringing fulfillment to my life, my heart is idolatrous. My eyes are blind. And I need Lord Jesus to heal me. And He says to us this morning, what is it you want me to do for you? Will we have just enough faith to tell Him? Let's finish in prayer. Oh, Lord, how beautiful is this world You've made for us. The white snow and the pale blue sky, leaves on the trees, the blades of grass we walk on. The differences between the crisp, cold air and the warm air of summer, seasons in their time, the sound of water, the taste of an apple. It's just so beautiful. Oh, my wife, my kids, my enemies. They're yours. They are the crowning glory of your creation. Lord, sometimes it's hard for us to love. Sometimes it's hard for us to see beauty in people we're angry with and people who have hurt us. We need your help. We need your power to help us to see clearly. Lord, will you heal us? Will you help us to partner with you, to have enough faith, to do what it takes, to spend time with you so that we can begin to see more clearly, so that love comes more naturally into our hearts? Community is easier to come by. I pray for this body this morning that you'll help them see, that you'll help them love, that you'll help them praise,